Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. Today we're going to do a quick video on heartburn and stomach irritation, cause and solutions. Really excited to dive in. We did a more in-depth podcast today on the topic. We'll put the links down below. And if you want to reach out to myself or my colleagues that address these issues at the root cause level, we'll put recommended products and services down there. All right, so first off, if you have stomach issues, burning, gastritis, let me know in the comments. Let me know things that you've done that have helped you personally. Now, we're going to go over a couple things here. A lot of times when we have gastritis or gastro, right? Gast is going to be like the stomach, the gastric area. Itis means tissue inflammation. So gastritis means inflammation in that stomach area, okay? Now we have to get to the underlying issue. Why is there inflammation in the stomach? And so when that gastritis is chronic, you're going to start to have the tissue wearing down and getting a little bit thinner. That's what's called atrophic gastritis. We have to look at the top 5 reasons why your stomach may be irritated. So first ones in there are going to be food allergens. So you're eating a lot of inflammatory foods, grains, processed foods, processed fats. That's going to put your body in a very inflammatory state. And if you have sensitivities to these foods, that chronic inflammation can wear down that gut lining. 2 is going to be not being able to break down the foods that you're eating adequately and decrease enzymes, decrease acids. All of those things can be a driving factor. 3 is going to be H. pylori and other types of bacterial overgrowth. All of these things can drive problems deeper and create more inflammation in the gut. And of course, also just having a lot of inflammation in your body. A lot of chronic inflammatory stress is going to drive cortisol. Chronic stress, chronic inflammation, that cortisol can wear through your gut lining and create more issues in that area, and just being more inflamed in general. So a lot of trans fats, a lot of junky omega-6 fatty acids. Chronic inflammation will cause your body to go into a fight or flight and break down that gut lining. Let me show you a couple things here and we'll kind of dive in out of the gates. Okay, so you guys can see here. Okay, good. All right, so you guys can see me here. This is the stomach anatomy here. So you have the top part of the stomach known as the fundus. You have the bottom part of the stomach known as the antrum, and then the cardiac area right here in the middle. And this is where the esophagus and the stomach meet. And a lot of times inflammation is going to happen in this area primarily due to the fact that this sphincter right here is not closing. So normally you have these muscles contract right here, this sphincter closes, and that prevents a lot of acids and things from rising up. If we have inflammatory foods, right, or we have a imbalance in bad bacteria, that's going to keep this esophageal sphincter open, and the food that's sitting in the intestines, this gastric area, is going to rot, it's going to putrefy, it's going to ferment, it's going to rancidify, and you're going to have a lot of different acids kind of rise up. You can even have silent reflux where you have a lot of reflux happening, but you're not having that acute burning or that acute bit of, throw up come back in your mouth, if you will. And then, of course, over time, we can chronically, so here's how your intestines look here, right? And over time, what you're going to see is you can have an ulcer. And so this is what atrophic gastritis starts as. This is your gut lining. These are the healthy mucosal cells right here. And then over time, these cells can wear down, you can see. Really important. And we need healthy parietal cells, right? So if we start inflaming our gut, we can start to break down our parietal cells. And parietal cells are the same cells that help produce hydrochloric acid. They're also the same cells that help produce intrinsic factors. So we also bind up B12 in our stomach. So think of B12 absorption as like a relay race. So you have the first baton is passed to intrinsic factor in the small intestine, and that relay race then goes down into the small intestine, duodenum, jejunum, ileum, where it is then absorbed at the end of the small intestine. So you have this essential relay race happening, and if you don't hand that first baton off in the first part of the stomach, then you're not going to be able to complete the relay race. So atrophic gastritis is a big deal. So we talked about reason number 1, right? Food allergens, gluten, dairy, big things like that. The second one is we're not breaking down our food. So if we don't have enough enzymes, don't have enough acids, that's a problem. Now, could these type of situations happen when there's too much acid? It could, but what tends to happen in a stressed environment is the sympathetic nervous system tends to decrease acid secretions and decrease enzyme secretions. And so typically you don't digest more when you're stressed, you digest less. And so then what starts to happen is inadequate enzymes, inadequate acids, and then that cortisol response starts to happen, and that cortisol can start to thin out that gut lining more. So if we start to have more cortisol issues, right, Cortisol is going to start to thin out the gut lining here as well, and it can compromise the immune system. And when your immune system starts to get compromised, what comes in next? You start having bugs like H. pylori coming in here, okay? You start having more epithelial, that's the intestinal skin. It starts to get inflamed and break down, okay? We also start to see that thinning gut lining starts to happen. So then when your body starts to make more acid, guess what that acid does to the intestinal tract? It's going to make it feel inflamed and more painful. People say, well, H. pylori increases my acid. It may, it's possible, but more than likely what's happening is your gut is sunburned. So it's kind of like if you went outside and you weren't sunburned and the sun hit your skin, it'd feel nice, right? You get sunburned, you go back outside the next day. It could be, reasonable weather, maybe 70 degrees, and that someone hit your skin and you'd say, ooh, it feels like it's 110 degrees out there because your sensitivity is now high strung. Because of the burn, everything feels much, much hotter than what it is. Well, this is what happens in your intestines. Essentially, your intestines are sunburned, and the little bit of acid that's there is going to feel like it's more than what it is, okay? So we have to really work on, when the gut is this thinned out and this inflamed, we have to work on digesting food, because indigestion of food isn't an option, but we have to work on breaking that food down better. And that may mean we're not breaking food down in our stomach. I mean, we have to chew our food better. It may mean we have to cook our food better, avoid lots of raw foods, avoid fermentable foods for a period of time, really chew our foods well, make sure meat's good, really use more enzymes and maybe acids if we can handle it. And then really work on getting to the bottom of the infection. So that's really important thing to look at out of the gate. So when I work with patients, the big things we look at are the 6 R's, right? Removing the bad foods, right? Getting the foods dialed in, replacing the enzymes, repairing the gut lining. That's important. Now, when we work on repairing the gut lining, we're using certain nutrients, glutamine, DGL, aloe. Zinc is very helpful. Lots of studies on zinc showing to be very helpful with gut permeability and also helping with the immune system. We talked about okra, vitamin A, right? Really important things. Cutting the bad foods out, right? Getting rid of the H. pylori, getting rid of the SIBO, getting rid of potential parasites. Again, that comes later in the game. So the first 6 R's, right? Remove the bad foods, replace the enzymes, acids, maybe bile salts as well. Bile may be a problem if your stools are floating. A lot of excessive wipes because that fat's not breaking down well, and fat tends to streak, right? Too much fat in the stool, skid marks on the toilet seat, and more than 5 wipes, okay? So remove the bad foods, replace the enzymes, acids, maybe bile salts. Repair the gut lining and the hormones. Hormones play a big role. Like I mentioned, if your cortisol is overly stressed or chronically low, that's going to burn down that gut lining, right? You need cortisol for healthy gut lining. Too much, you're going to break it down. Too little, you're not going to build it back. So repair the gut lining and the hormones. 4th R, we go over, we work on removing the infections. It's got to happen there. If that gut lining's inflamed, we're not breaking foods down well, we have a lot of food allergens, that gut lining's thin, and you go through a whole bunch of herbs that could be caustic, that could be a problem. So 4th R, remove the infections. 5th R, repopulate, reinoculate good bacteria. That comes later. When there's SIBO and bacterial overgrowth, putting a lot of fertilizer down can almost feed the bad bugs. So you always want to time that later. 6 R, we want to retest. And also, very important, if you have a spouse or a partner, even kids can pass this back and forth because it's just saliva-based, right? Just, non-intimate kissing and sharing of silverware and drinks can easily pass this around. You could have certain infections that are passed around via the house with these types of, innocent connections. So we got to get to the root, because if you're asymptomatic and your spouse has a lot of symptoms, you could be hot potatoing infections back and forth, keeping them from healing. So if you're in a program, you want to get to the root of where it's coming from and isolate this hot potatoing back and forth. So again, this is Dr. J here. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Hope it made sense to you. If it resonated with you, click down below. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a like. Give me a comment below. And if you want to reach out to myself and my colleagues, we're here to help you worldwide. Click down below. Love to help you. And please share it with family and friends that can benefit. All right, let me see if I have any questions here. What is cooking on the question side, y'all? Okay, what do we got? Okay, cool. So one question here I'm going to kind of dive into. How much HCl should you take? What's the right dosage on HCl? So out of the gates, if you're taking HCl and it helps your digestion, right, you can start off with 500 milligrams. If you're on the fence or you have any history of acid burning or irritation, start with 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar in 4 ounces of water. Drink it about a couple minutes before a meal. See how you do. If it helps, great. If it causes any burning, you should not be taking HCl. You should be leaning on enzymes and maybe a little bit of ginger or some gentle bitters. But if you have a history of ulcers or history of acute burning, the only thing I would say is maybe test with a little bit of lemon juice or ACV. Start off with a teaspoon and see how you do. If it's irritation, we're done. If you feel better, then you can gently taper it up. But again, if you have a history of ulcerations or chronic digestive issues, you want to be working with a good functional medicine practitioner so you don't create an ulcer, right? When is too much HCl? So out of the question, I see patients saying, well, or people online saying, you should do 20 HCl. I've had a couple times in my career where people really felt good doing a higher dose. So if someone feels good doing a higher dose, number one, I got to make sure it really is beneficial. Number two, they don't have a history of any burning or irritation. When you take a lot of HCl, let me show you this picture here. When you take a lot of HCl, show you here. Okay, so what happens here, the duodenum here, you have a whole bunch of bile salts, and well, essentially when this food goes from the stomach here and it goes into the small intestine, the pancreas has to produce a whole bunch of bicarbonate to neutralize all of the acidic chyme here. So it goes to the duodenum, and then you have to make a whole bunch of bicarbonate. And if you stress out that bicarbonate system and there's not enough there to take that acid up to neutral, you're going to get a peptic ulcer, duodenal ulcer. So we got to be very careful. So this is a gastric ulcer. Duodenal ulcer is going to happen typically down lower in the small intestine. The duodenum, I think, is the first 6 to 12 inches of the small intestine. So you got to be extra careful of that, as that can cause a bunch of problems. So I always say taper up. I don't like to do more than 3 grams of HCl at a meal unless someone is really feeling good, feeling healthy, and they want to go a little bit above that, and they feel a palpable improvement. They notice it, they feel less bloated, better digestion, fine. Maybe 5 grams for me is the high limit. But I'd say 3 to 5 grams would probably be the high limit for me. Great, exactly. All right, good. What supplement helps lower cortisol? It's a great question. So out of the gates, we can do low-hanging fruit like magnesium, very helpful. Phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine. Adaptogenic herbs like rhodiola, ashwagandha, holy basil. You can do amino acid compounds like GABA, taurine. These are all excellent things you can do out of the gates. All right, excellent. Very good. All right, any other questions, y'all? Let's see here. Does berberine have any effect on better gut health? Yeah, it does. Berberine is very powerful at helping knocking down bad bugs. Especially, it's known for SIBO, 5 grams a day at high doses. But it can also be helpful for bacterial overgrowth in the intestines, in the stomach, I should say, right? Gastric bacterial overgrowth, you want to do a glucose breath test to assess that. I just do a global gut test, and that usually, if I see overgrowth there, then we're going to treat it anyway. Are bile salts safe if you end up not needing them? Yeah, they're totally safe. I typically don't add extra bile salts unless I'm seeing the skid marks, excessive wipes, or floating stools. If we don't see that, then we're not going to do it. Also, I'm testing on the gut for steatocrit, which is maldigested fat. Dr. J, how do I know if I have a pathogen in my body? Well, you can test. We can do a gut test and look for gut infection. So feel free to click down below. We'll have a link to our GI map test there. And also, if you want to reach out to myself, we can do that kind of test and figure out what's happening. How do I fix my gut issues and improve hydration? So, that would be a podcast topic. So go to justinhealth.com, put that in the search bar, and you will find a podcast on that topic. But hydration, good, clean, filtered water. Make sure there's enough minerals in there. Half your body weight in ounces is a pretty good rule of thumb. Should you avoid MCT oil with stomach issues? I drank a smoothie with it, and I felt like I immediately went into a seizure that I had to have diarrhea. Yeah, MCT oil can have a laxative effect, so it can cause explosive diarrhea. So if you're going to start with MCT, start with a teaspoon and then taper up. Typically, more than a tablespoon can cause significant loose stool. So I love MCT oil, but start with a teaspoon and see how you do. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. Links for you below, thumbs up, comments below. Want to know what's worked for you. Share it with people on the video boards here, guys.